Hey, Mark, obviously here we've got some great research from 2021. We want to talk to farmers, but it's been a while since we've been in front of our customers talking about this research. Give them some idea what we've been doing the last couple of months there.
Well, so really the last couple of months have been taking all that data, putting it all together. I mean, it's one thing just to go in and harvest and you're done with the field, but we have to spend a lot of time, making sure that we get the data in. We make sure we, look at the outliers. Are there any issues in the plots? Go through, clean it up, and then actually get it in a write-up and use our knowledge transfer folks to get it in a nice PowerPoint form for us. So it's a pretty big process.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of hours. There's a big team behind this that is doing a lot of fine-tuning on various research reports and so on. But we're happy to say that we're moving forward, right, with a number of our reports that we'll be able to share with our farmers coming up here. And one report in particular that we can share now is the effective seeding rate and planting date on irrigated XtendFlex soybeans. And so I look at this research. We've done planting date research on soybeans for a number of years across Roundup Ready Yield beans, Xtend and XtendFlex, and obviously, as we continue forward, we'll continue to evaluate that because planting date seems to be one of those things that farmers can quickly latch on to with respect to a management practice they can employ.
Yeah, there's not a lot of cost to it when you think about it. That's one kind of key piece of it, I think, is a management piece.
Yeah, exactly. And so this trial, again, looked at some XtendFlex soybeans, and we had multiple planting dates and seeding rates. And so it was done out here in Gothenburg on Horde silt loam after corn. So we've got our corn-soybean rotation. For those of you that have been on the Southern Tour Road, that's where we always have a corn-soybean rotation, but this was actually done out on our east field, right?
Yes, yeah, fairly. If we want to do something large with a lot of replications, we've got some more space over there to do it with.
Yep, exactly. And so planting dates, April 5th, April 19th, May 1st, June 7th, and June 21st. Did we have any issues with those planting dates at all?
Well, I mean, and it is appropriate we're doing this one first. It was the earliest thing that we planted on the farm there, April 5th. And the weather was great on April 5th, no challenges there. April 19th was a different story. We actually planted it kind of spit and snow, and we got it in. Between that, it actually snowed kind of about 2 or 3 inches that night, I think, of a heavy wet snow. And then, later in the season, some rains and things like that we had to work around. So there were some challenges. It seems like there always are with the planting date study. You just, put the dates out there in your protocol, and something always happens where you don't hit them exactly where you want to.
Right. But again, back to what we've done in the past, we always try to get an early April planting and then obviously a late June planting and then mix the planting dates in between then, right, to get multiple points on there. And then seeding rates, we got 40, 80, 120, 160, 200, and 240,000 seeds per acre. Obviously, the plants look considerably different at 40,000 versus 240,000.
Yes, I mean, you definitely tell the difference in them as far as the branchiness and all that when they have space. But it is interesting to really look at, what's the actual yield we get out of them at the end of the season. Exactly.
And then back to the maturity groups that are relevant for the Central Plains. We got a 2.5, 2.7, 2.9 maturity group XtendFlex soybeans. And so the XtendFlex, again, is going to be our basically dominant trait that we're moving forward with. And then the soybeans were irrigated throughout the season, so this was a fully irrigated soybean study, and weeds were controlled uniformly. And then we had multiple harvest dates, and so back to a planting date. Why do we have all those harvest dates?
The same thing. Now, it's not quite as wide a spread as what you see in the planting date, but obviously, if you're taking the same maturity of bean and planting it, a month later, month and a half later, it just takes a little bit longer to mature. So we need to go back to the field, 3 or 4 times to actually get this study all harvested.
Yep. And obviously make sure that we don't have any shattering out there on those beans, and we're getting actually.
Yeah, you don't want to leave the ones sit there too long either. Otherwise, your yield data isn't going to be very good, because eventually, you'll lose a lot of those beans.
So here we've got the planting date information, and we can see some pretty strong yields at that. Actually, April 5th had some pretty good yields, April 19th and May 1st. Across the research, and then it decreases as we get into June and in the end part of June. But when we look at our previous year's research, we consistently see that end of April, first part of May being the planting dates that we encourage farmers to use. We have seen some issues with that early planting date in April, like that April 5th planting date. What have we seen in the past?
So, I mean, in the past, yeah, it really seems like the last, 10 days to 2 weeks of April, the first 2 weeks of May is really that kind of sweet spot year over year. This year, planting really early, I don't know if it's because we had some warmer conditions right away or what it was, but it worked pretty well. That's not quite as consistent. That's a little bit riskier. But this year, it did show up with at least the highest numerical yields out there by the planting date. And then as you move really beyond May 15th, typically, we'll start to see a fairly large drop-off in terms of the yield that we're able to realize. In the same field, same environment, you just don't have as long a growing season. You can't put as many nodes on the beans, it doesn't seem like, and achieve the yields you could have at that early planting date.
So we definitely encourage farmers looking at that end of April, first part of May time frame for their high yielding soybeans. And then when we come to, and that just kind of summarizes the planting date. But then when we come to seeding rate, there's lots of discussions about seeding rate. Sometimes, lower seeding rate can still provide a lot of yield potential. And then you'll still have some farmers looking at some of those higher seeding rates depending upon the soil conditions, right? Maybe if you get some crusting and so on, a different seeding rate might be appropriate. But where we have looked at seeding rate over a number of years, that sweet spot would be where at for you?
For me, it's really around that 160,000 range. Really seems like the sweet spot. Now, I'm not saying that maybe every variety seems to respond that way. Once in a while, you'll see one that at a really high density will produce a few more bushels, or maybe one that performs better than you'd expect at a really low density. But for the most part, as we just kind of look at that broad average, it seems like it's about 160,000 seeds per acre or more. And I think some of that really relates to just making sure, if we've got things that happen in the spring with cold weather, maybe some stress, maybe a little bit of hail knocking some of those beans off, a little bit of crusting. You want to have an adequate stand so you're not looking at a replant scenario or something like that. And consistently we see that at 160,000.
And so in this one, the 40,000 is the blue bar. It's down there, 10, 15 bushels behind everything else. But you'll notice that this is the seeding rate across all the planting dates for the different soybeans. So we got the 2.5, 2.7, and 2.9 maturity group. And that yellow bar is the 160,000. And so, depending upon the soybean product, it may or may not have been the highest. But again, it's pretty consistent that when we look across years and so on, across multiple products, that back to what you were just saying, that sweet spot tends to come out to be about that 160,000.
Yeah, and of course you can look at it in the economics pieces, but you are, spending more on seed if you go above that, and I think you're taking a lot more risk on a replant scenario when you go very far below that.
Yep. And so I think that, when we look at fully irrigated soybeans, again, that 160,000 is a good spot for our farmers to be at. And this just kind of summarizes that. Again, this report will be in our big book for the Central Plains that we'll have out sometime in February. But we'll take the time over the next few weeks to go over some of these research studies. And so, again, We really want to look at, just to summarize this, really want to look at that end of April, first part of May, to plant our soybeans with that 160,000 seeding rate for our XtendFlex soybeans. And so there's our legal statement. Any other final thoughts, Mark?
I think the one thing I did forget to mention, I've had a lot more success at those early planting dates with a full seed treatment. And these soybeans, I think it's important to point out, had a full fungicide, insecticide seed treatment on them. I've planted soybeans very early without them, and I've seen failures where the beans with the seed treatment you'll have a fair stand with. So that's one key piece in there, I think.
Yep, and that's a very good point, because those that earlier planting dates are going to have much colder soils and much more prone to having diseases come in on those soybeans when it's just kind of sitting out there in that soil, right?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't see those come up until like the first week of May probably. So they sat in the ground about 30, 35 days. So that treatment's important.
Yep, that's a very good point. So with that, we'll talk to you in the future about other agronomic topics, and look forward to sharing the research from 2021 with you in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this video from the Gothenburg Water Utilization Learning Center. For more information, please call 308-537-4500.